We are in Genesis. We're at the end, too. We're not at the end of Genesis, but we're at the end of this series. So this is going to be the last one in this thing that we call the promise and the patriarchs. And so looking at the promise that started with Abraham, where God says, I'm going to start a whole community and a nation with you as the beginning of it, and I'm going to live in your presence, and you're going to be abundant life. And that promise goes through Abraham to his son Isaac, and then from Isaac to his son Jacob. And today we're in Jacob's life right now. And we know, based on what we know in the New Testament, that this promise funneled through the nation of Israel, eventually through the tribe of Judah, Jacob's son Judah, and then through to the Messiah, Jesus. And then through Jesus, that promise blesses all mankind. So it's life with him. So that's what we're looking at, this promise that's characterized throughout the entire Bible. We're going to finish it today. We could keep going, but we're going to be at a very significant turning point in the life of Jacob. Before we get there, if you weren't with us last week, let me catch up where we are. This guy on the screen up here, his name is Laban. That's Laban right there. He's the father-in-law of Jacob. Laban's the father-in-law of Jacob. He's kind of a pagan dude. Last week he had his gods stolen from him. So he said, "Why did you steal my gods?" He didn't know it was his daughter that stole the gods. And like a clueless sort of guy he is, he should be asking the question, what kind of gods can be stolen? The brass plates. Yeah. So anyway, so that's the whole deal. Laban lost his gods, and anyone who can steal your gods are probably not gods if they can be stolen. And so anyway, so that's happened last week. And sat on in a very disgusting way. So here we are. Here's Laban finally goes home. He chased Jacob down as he left the area where he got his wives. Laban leaves. He returns. He goes back to his place. And this is what happens. He backtracks. He came all the way up here from what is present-day Upper Syria. And he goes home, and now Jacob and his entourage, his entire family is there in that little green dot, which is today about where the Golan Heights is in Israel. If you follow the politics in Israel, it's the Golan Heights. It's the area directly east of the Sea of Galilee. It's a border area militarily today between Israel and Syria. So Israel holds on to it today. It's strategic. That's where he is. He's going home. He did start way up there. And home for him is somewhere right about there. That's where Beersheba is. That's where he left his father and everything. 20 years ago, he left that place. That's where he's aiming towards. Now, you are good geographers. He's got one of two choices for a route to get home today. He can either go this way, which is directly over the Sea of Galilee and down. I'll call that Route A. Or he can go this way, which is Route B, which is to go down the eastern side of the Jordan River, cut across at Jericho, and then come down there. Route A or B is what we're going to do, so let's see what happens. Oh, by the way, there's a complication with this, too. Remember Esau, his brother, wants to kill him? He's living somewhere in that little red zone. Yes, the red cliffs of Edom. That's where Esau lives. So, and you remember, he fled town 20 years ago because he'd done so much dirt to his brother Esau that Esau was consoling himself with planning Jacob's death. So maybe we want to avoid the red zone on the way back home. So let's vote right now. Which route do you think you should take? Route A? Yep. Route B? I don't care. This is a stupid exercise. Okay. Head west. Head west.
Depends on if he wants to make amends.
That's exactly right. If he wants to make amends with Esau, he'll go Route B. If he wants to avoid Esau at all counts, he'll go Route A. So let's see what happens. We pick up the story, chapter 22 of Genesis, 32, verse 1. Now as Jacob went on his way, the angels of God met him. Wow, really? Yeah. And Jacob said when he saw them, "This is God's camp." So he named that place Mahanaim. Well, so where he is up there in the Golan Heights, present day, he starts to move south from there somehow or east or someplace, but he goes to this place. These angels of God intersect him. Remember, he had angels intersect him as he left 20 years ago. Now they're intersecting him as he's coming back. And he gives us a clue about which route he took, Route A or Route B. By the way, Mahanaim, the first part, the Maha means camp. If you go camping today, you're actually Mahaniing. Mahana, yeah, Mahana. And Im is a plural version of that. Anytime you see Im, it means plural. So this word came to be called camps or two camps for some reasons, and you'll see why maybe two camps rather than camps, but it's just a plural camp. It's like a big campsite. It's a KOA in the old world, okay? So he calls this camps because not only am I camping here with my family, but it seems as though the angels of God are camping here too. So we met them here, Mahanaim. So where's Mahanaim on our map? That'll give us a clue whether we're on Route A or Route B. Well, Mahanaim is, let's see, if we go around here, it's sort of, no, it's, well, maybe, right there. That's where Mahanaim is. So he didn't take Route A, took Route B. And so what's going to happen? We could have a confrontation with Esau. We could definitely have a confrontation. Now, just to be fair, archaeologists today have two good places where they think Mahanaim is, but they're both on a river, the Jabbok River, which is where that is. It goes off to the right of the Jordan River. They're both on the Jabbok River. The only question is just how far east it is. But that big triangle pretty much covers both of the sites they think it's probably at. Mahanaim, the camps. So he's going to probably have a confrontation with Esau. So the next thing he does is deal with it. So Jacob sent messengers before him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir. By the way, Seir is the whole land that's east of the Dead Sea and the Jordan River Valley, probably further south. He sends a message to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, and he also commanded them, saying, "Thus you shall say to my lord Esau, thus says your servant Jacob, I have sojourned with Laban," that's the father-in-law, "and stayed until very now, it's 20 years. I have oxen and donkeys and flocks and male and female servants, and I have sent to tell my Lord that I may find favor in your sight." So he sends messengers first and says, "This is me," because when he starts to see the dust of this huge company of people and all these animals, send the messengers across and say, "This is your brother Jacob." Now, how does he address his brother Jacob? Does he say brother Jacob? What does he say? Lord. Now, this is a very important distinction. Jacob is basically saying that Esau, his older brother by rights, is actually the authoritarian superior of him. It's a small L because it's not Lord God, it's just Lord. So he's using a very formal term which basically recognizes Esau's standing. Now remember, when he left town 20 years ago, he subverted that. He turned it upside down. He stole Esau's superior standing. Now he's calling him his superior. So something has changed in 20 years in the heart of Jacob. So this is what he tells him to say. This is who's coming. So the messengers returned to Jacob, and they said, "We came to your brother Esau." Cool. And furthermore, he's coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him. It's like the good news, bad news. "We saw your brother Esau. Good job. He's coming with 400 men.
They don't even have the armor of God on.
I know, they don't have the armor of God on. And by the way, this is a picture from the 300, not the 400. But that's okay. You don't know that. You don't know that. So he comes back and he says, you got to understand, Esau is coming and he's got 400 fighting men. That's what this means. Yeah. Don't say you had to forget that, okay? So the response he gets back scares him to death. Here comes Esau. He's left home. He's coming our direction. And he's got 400 fighting men. Mercenaries, yeah. Abraham didn't have this many when he went chasing after his nephew when he got taken away to the kings of the north. 400 men are coming with Esau. So you're Jacob. Are you threatened?
Oh boy.
Should be, because this should scare you to death. Well, sure enough, Jacob was greatly afraid. Isn't this great? Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people who were with him in the flocks and the herds, the camels, into two companies. So he has his flocks and his herds, and he decides, listen, what I'll do is, I'll chop them in half. I'll put them in two different directions. Why? For he said, verse 8, if Esau comes to the one company and attacks it, then the company which is left will escape. That's good shepherding in a way. I'll just split them, so if there's an absolute catastrophe with the one, I'll have half my family. So we'll try that. So Jacob says, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your relatives, and I will prosper you, the God who promised that, he says, I'm unworthy of all the loving kindness and of all the faithfulness which you have shown to your servant. For with my staff only I crossed this Jordan, and now I've become two companies. By the way, a little piece of interest. This prayer of Jacob's right now is the longest prayer in Genesis. No fooling. So what's he praying? Well, he's scared to death. We know he's scared to death. What does he go back to immediately? He goes back to God's promise. He goes back to God's promise. He says, you said, return to your country and to your relatives and I'll prosper you. And you know what? You've done that because here I am on the brink of coming back home. I left home with the shirt on my back and the staff in my hand. That's all I had. And now I come back as two huge companies of families. And God, you have done this. So God has been good to his word about prospering him. So if God's good to his word prospering him, he's just reminding God, and by the way, you promised to bring me home safely. Right? And that was part of the deal. So if you did part A, part B must going to be happen. So God, I'm appealing to you. I'm reminding you. That's what you said. Verse 10 is a fascinating change in the heart of him. Not that he needs to be reminded. In fact, it's really Jacob reminding himself what God said. You said you'd make me big. You did. And you said you'd bring me back safe. And that's what I'm asking for. So it's really a good process. But it's his heart that's demonstrated in the second verse. Look at his heart. I am unworthy. It's not like I'm some kind of hot shot, like I really deserved what I'm coming back with. I left town with nothing. I'm coming back with all this, and I've got it, and I'm unworthy. And God, you did this. I'm unworthy of all that stuff. So instead of going to God and saying, God, you promised this, and by the way, I am the son of Isaac, and he is the son of Abraham, the man of faith, so I have this godly blood in me, and I deserve for you. He doesn't pull any of those at all. No entitlement, no worthiness. He says, I've been blessed by you. I'm still unworthy, so I'm not asking any favors here. I'm not asking because of who I am. I'm asking because you promised. That's a big deal. I'm asking because you promised. He goes on in this prayer. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he will come, he'll attack me, and the mothers with the children. He's praying on behalf of himself, and he's praying on behalf of the ones that he's in charge of to shepherd, his whole family. God, come, because I fear my brother Esau. He could say right here, and by the way, I did this to myself. I made my bed and I should lie in it. In fact, he's mad at me because of what I did. He doesn't really say that. He just says, Esau's mad at me and now he may want to kill my family. Will you engage on my behalf? For you said, talking to God, I will surely prosper you, which has happened, and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which is too great to be numbered. So now he brings out a second thing he remembers God saying. God's saying that I'll take care of you. And by the way, I'll take care of you in such a way that your family will never be wiped out. In fact, you'll have descendants that'll be so large you won't even be able to count them. So God, if you said my descendants will be that big, I'm asking you to preserve them today because that's part of your plan, isn't it? Preserve them? Sand seashore? Yes. So he goes to God. He goes to God. This great, great thing. He asks no things. But look at this. Jesus said to John 15, if you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it'll be done for you. Now, why did I stick that up there? Because Jacob knew what God had promised. Jacob knew what the words of God were in terms of his future. So when he prays this prayer, he can pray it with confidence. Why? Because God's word, his promise for his protection and his provision was given to him, and now he's just praying that back and say, God, this is what you promised. It's exactly what Jesus is saying when he's here in 15. This John 15 passage is the one about the vine and the branches. I'm the vine, you're the branches. If you abide in me and I in you, that's what he's talking about. And so he's saying right here, part of that abiding process is having God's word, his promises to you, living in you. It radically changes the nature of your prayers. Because then all you have to do is remind God, you promised this. You love me intensely. Will you intercede on my behalf right here? Now, it may not be very specific, but the degree of your prayers with God will come true to the degree that you understand what he's already promised you. That's what I'm saying. And Jacob knows what God promised him. So he can pray this with confidence. He prays this with confidence. This is what you promised me. Will you do it, please, because this is the time. So verse 13, he spent the night there. Then he selected from what he had with him a present. So let's give Esau a present for his brother Esau. So what's the present? Well, verse 14, 200 female goats and 20 male goats. We need sound effects. Sound effects? Yeah, that's close enough. Okay. 200 ewes and 20 rams. Is there a different sound between goats and sheep, by the way? I don't know. So this is the big, This is the present. Start with some goats, go to 200 ewes and 20 rams. It's actually very generous. Also, let's add in there 30 milking camels and their colts. I don't know what sound they make. Let's do 40 cows and 10 bulls. This is a lot of cattle. This is a pretty good deal. And finally, let's wrap it up with 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. So this is the present. There goes. This is the present. I'll send these across to Esau, and I'll share some of what God has given me with him. We'll just do a present. And so he delivered them into the hand of his servants, every drove by itself. And he said to his servants, listen, pass on before me with these animals and put a space between the droves. That is, you start with the goats, and the goats come and go, and then there's a space, and then there's the sheep, and they come and go, and then there's a space, and then you have, what is it? Camels, and then there's a space, and what's next? Cattle, okay, and then there's a space, and then there's some donkeys, okay? So he's saying, send these off, not all together, in separate kind of patches, different droves, okay? And why? Well, he explains it in just a second here. He says this, that's right. He says, so he commanded the one in front, the front drove, saying this, so when my brother Esau meets you and asks you, saying, to whom do you belong and where are you going, and to whom do these animals in front of you belong? Then you shall say, these belong to your servant Jacob. See that phrase? Your servant Jacob. It's a present sent to my lord Esau. My lord Esau. So again, he's really reinforcing the role. And behold, he's behind us. He's coming. Say that the guys in the first drove will do that, and then all the subsequent ones will say the same thing. Then he commanded also the second and the third, and then all those who followed the drove, saying, after this manner you shall speak to Esau when you find him, and you shall say, don't forget this, behold, your servant Jacob also is behind us. Okay, so you got the picture? Got the picture? They're in two different camps. Jacob's saying to these guys, take this incredible, costly presents, drive them along in these droves and these packs. And when Esau sees the first one, say, these belong to your brother Jacob, and he's giving to you as a gift. And, he'll see the first one, the first gifts, and he'll go, wow, look at all these goats. That's pretty nice. And then he's kind of thinking about that. Shoo, come the sheep, 200 of them. And that guy will say, these belong to your brother Jacob. They're present to you. Oh, goats and sheep, this is incredible. And then, shoo, camels. See what he's doing here? It's like, that's great. That's even greater. That's spectacular. Wow, cattle and donkeys too. So you see, he's doing this to kind of make this message to his brother Esau that he wants to make peace. He wants to give him a gift. He left town taking everything from Esau. He's coming back to town, giving back to him really richly. I read some commentaries on really how much wealth he's talking about in these presents. This is sizable. This is really sizable. This is not trivial at all.
If you were to take a stab at a guess
The cost?
monetarily, what the value would be, just a wild
I have no clue. I have no clue. But when you have 200 sheep, that's a pretty good flock, And to have those milking camels, that means that these are female or male camels.
With the sheep, that's a lot of clothing.
And female camels make more camels. So these are very valuable camels. Yeah, they have foals in them. Yeah. So this is not just a handful of camels. This is promise of a huge herd of camels. This is, I don't know how expensive, but they said this is like the first couple droves would have been pretty good. These 5 droves is way over the top. So Jacob is not being stingy. He said, I want my brother Esau to understand that I want to give to him rather than take from him this time. So this is what happens. And he gives this idea that he's coming behind. For he said this, he said, I will appease him with a present that goes before me. Then afterward, I will see his face and perhaps he'll accept me. Now, when you see the phrase, I'll see his face, it's kind of an idiom we still use to this day. Someday, from the thing you did wrong, you're going to have to face up to what you did wrong. So face up to in this old idiom is a way of saying you're going to have to face up to the consequences of what you've done. So he says, when I see my brother, then afterward I will see his face. That means I'm going to have to face him with what I've done. And maybe he'll accept me. So he realizes he's coming to judgment with Esau. I'm going to have to face him. And as a result, face what I did to him 20 years ago. Maybe with the gifts, he'll accept me. We'll see. So the present passed on before him. He sent the present on while he himself spent the night in the camp. So the present, yeah?
It begs the question, how much of his herds did he give him? All of them?
Yeah, what percentage of his herds?
Yeah. Did he give him all of them? Or
It's really hard to say. Probably just a portion of his herds.
kind of curious.
Yeah, probably just a portion. Yeah. Okay, anyway. So he sends that ahead. He sends the 5 droves ahead with his servants to say that Jacob's coming. And then Jacob stays behind. Jacob doesn't come with the presents. He's going to give it a little time to kind of settle in. Here's actually a picture of the present Jabbok River in the middle of Jordan today. That's the river we're talking about. That's where we're at. Now, he arose that same night, it's night now, took his 2 wives and his 2 maids and his 11 children and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. And does this at night, which, by the way, is a very dangerous thing on the Jabbok River. You don't go fording a river in the middle of the night with your kids and your family. It's just nuts. But he wants to get them on the other side of the river. Actually, this river is separating his camp from Esau's camp. So he gets his family on the dangerous side of the river in the middle of the night, so they're not in danger. He took them and sent them across the stream, and he sent across whatever he had. So now on his side of the stream, on his side of the Jabbok, he has nothing but himself. He's all alone. Now, if you go back to the roots of how scallywaggish Jacob was, at this point in the story, you might be tempted to write into there, he sent everyone over to Esau, and then he ran the other way because he's a coward. He stays behind, but he doesn't stay behind because he's a coward. He stays behind because he needs to do something really important all by himself. Guesses?
So he sent them over to the dangerous?
Sent them to the dangerous side. And he alone is left. So, on the safe side. So watch what happens. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. What? Okay, time out. What? He stayed on the dangerous side. Now, think about this for a second. He's here. What's completely occupying Jacob's mind right now? Completely. His brother Esau and the danger of his brother Esau. He sent everyone else across. He needs to sort of get his head together, maybe pray to God, do something, but he's consumed with this fear that maybe even tomorrow, at the end of the day tomorrow, he may not even have a family left. They may all be killed by the 400 fighting men. 400. I've only got, my 4 wives, 2 wives, and there are 2 kind of handmaids, and my 11 kids. It's actually 12 kids because you didn't count Dinah, his daughter, but that's okay. We'll get back to that another time. It's going to be easy for 400 armored men to take out my family, steal everything I own, come hunting after me. By this time tomorrow night, I might be dead. And you know what? It would be fair. Because I stole from Esau probably the most important thing in his life. That's what's consuming his mind right now. And as he's consuming his mind and he's wrestling over this matter, suddenly he finds himself wrestling with a man in the dark. What? Yeah. So if you're Jacob, who would you think this guy is in the dark?
His brother.
Himself? His brother Esau? Satan? An angel, maybe? I don't know. A man, just simply a man. It's dark. We don't have any other indication that there was this big white thing with wings or something or a sword. I mean, it's just, he found himself in the middle of the dark, all by himself, all alone on this side of the river. He's sure he's all alone, but now he's wrestling with some man. And he's in Esau's territory. Could be a scout for Esau. Could be some guy who's out to get us and out just to find out what's going on. I don't know who this guy is. I'll wrestle with him and I'll get it out of him. So you know how long the wrestling match goes? In the dark, in the middle of the night? All night long. The man, he doesn't know, but clearly he needs to wrestle him. So he wrestles him. 25. Well, when he saw that he had not prevailed, this is the man, when he saw he had not prevailed against him, he touched the socket of his thigh. So the socket of Jacob's thigh was dislocated while he wrestled with him. Okay, wait a second. This must not be an ordinary man then, right? How many World Federation wrestlers have you seen go and their thigh comes off? I don't know any, really. And the wording is very clever. It doesn't say that he got him in one of these holds that they taught us, in InterVarsity wrestling, where you can do something and say, don't go one more degree in that hold or else you'll pop his hip out. I never got one of those great things because I would have liked to know about that. I was in intramural wrestling in junior high. I was a big boy in junior high, big boy. I got almost my entire stature within a year and a half from. So when I got into junior high, somehow I find myself in the gymnasium with hundreds of people in the intramural finals of wrestling for my weight class, and I'd never wrestled once. Why? Because there were only 3 of us in the school that were in the weight class. The other 2 guys wrestled each other. I never wrestled anyone. So now hundreds of people come in the gymnasium in junior high to watch the finals of the intramural wrestling. I'm in the final match, having never wrestled in my entire life, and I got creamed. I hate wrestling to this day. So, but I don't know any holds where you can pop someone's socket. So clearly, in doing this, this guy has announced that I've got powers that you don't know about. This is where it starts to cross over into maybe we're talking about a divine category of who I'm wrestling with. But it begs another question. If this guy can go and pop my thigh out, how comes he didn't do it last night at 8 o'clock rather than 3 o'clock in the morning right now? How comes the whole night long he wrestled with me and he didn't pop my hip out when all along he could have? He could have come out with the secret move from the very stop. Let's wrestle, Jacob. Oh, you're done. He didn't do that. So why did this guy egg me on all night long, exhausting me? I don't know who this guy is. We seem to be equally matched because I wrestle, he wrestle, we don't go anywhere, we're perfectly matched, and yet he puts an end to it by touching me in the hip at the end. Why? Why is this guy messing with me? And clearly has some kind of divine plan. See what's going on in his head? What is this? Am I being toyed with? I'm worried about my entire family being completely eradicated tomorrow, and this guy is messing with me in the middle of the night, wrestling with me. But he does know this. This guy has some kind of supernatural connection based on the fact that he can best me with a touch. And something changes in his thinking. Now, if you've wrestled before and you don't have a hip that's working, have you ever wrestled? Because when you're down on all fours, your legs are a big deal. If you only got one leg, you can't get around, you can't support, you can't do things. It's over. You just can't wrestle. The only thing you got left after that point is just your arms, pretty much. It's just your arms. And when another guy has his legs as well, you're completely outclassed. You can't do anything. So really, it's the end of the match. Tap out, exactly. Yeah. Tag team wrestling. Did you ever watch that in the 60s? That was just great. Anyway, so what happens? Well, then he said, let me go, for the dawn is breaking. This is the guy he's wrestling with. And Jacob says, I will not go unless you bless me. Now, the wrestling match has changed. It seemed to be an adversarial thing in the beginning, this unknown opposition who's fighting me at every stitch. And I don't know who he is or why we're fighting, but I better fight because if he wins, I don't know what could happen. And now he understands because of this to the thigh, maybe this guy has a divine connection. If this guy has a divine connection, maybe he's just an angel, then maybe I better use all the resources I have left, my arms, and I'll grab onto him and say, this isn't about me winning the match anymore. This is about me saying, I'm not letting you go until you bless me. You know, there's a very... Sure, say something, Bob. Go ahead.
You know, I just got this new promotion, right?
Right.
Prior to getting that promotion, I know I was wrestling with God. It was me wrestling with God, not God wrestling with me.
Yes.
I got to the total point of exhaustion, not my hip out of joint, but until God said, look. And I went to sleep, and I woke up the next morning, and God revealed to me that I was going to take on this huge elephant. How best can I eat that elephant by eating it a little bite one time, a little bite at a time?
Right,
It was
right.
the same. I mean, I'm hearing that right now as you're saying that, and it was God that he was wrestling. Jacob was doing the wrestling.
Exactly.
The man wasn't wrestling back.
Exactly.
I mean, wow, what an eye-opener.
Do we ever wrestle with God and not know it? Okay, we'll get to this. I think this is the point of this whole thing. This is a dramatic change in the life of Jacob. Dramatic change. In fact, if you'll allow me, this is Jacob's born-again experience. Without using the word born again. And we'll describe why in a second here. So anyway, he says, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. So you remember, at the beginning of this crazy, crazy wrestling match, he's using all of his might, all of his limbs, his legs and his arms to wrestle this unknown assailant. And it's a wrestling match. Someone wins and someone loses. Now it's turned from I won't let you go until you bless me. And all I got left is my arms. Now, have you ever noticed that there's a very fine line between wrestling and hugging? And some of us are thicker than others, so that's okay. Yeah, and in fact, I was reading a commentary by a biblical scholar. He goes one step further. He says, you notice how fine a line it is between wrestling and making love? Don't answer that.
What?
Well, in terms One of them is there to win and to take. The other one is to give and to bless. So something radically changes in the midst of this confrontation. If you came in the middle of it, you wouldn't understand. But this guy, Jacob, has suddenly gone from saying, I think I'm in close contact with God himself. I'm going to use all the power that I was using to fight my opponent that I didn't know. I'm going to use all that power to guarantee that this guy blesses me. I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. Tenacious in both counts. You see that? Let's continue what goes on. So he said to him, so what's your name? This is the guy he's wrestling. What's your name? And Jacob says, I'm Jacob. You remember what Jacob means? That means people see me as a supplanter and a deceiver. That's why he asked him, what's your name? Because remember, a name isn't just an artificial thing. A name represents who you are, right? A name represents who you are. So this guy he's wrestling with says, how do people know you? What do they call you? What do they think of you based on your name? And Jacob has to respond, they call me the supplanter and the deceiver. That's what they call me. So I'm known as. So his wrestler says, your name shall no longer be supplanter and deceiver, Jacob, but Israel. For you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. So what does Israel mean? Israel means, it comes from two roots. The first part means to strive or to fight or prevail. It's the word you'd use when an army would win finally. They prevailed. They struggled. They got in the fight. It was protracted. And in the very end, yay, we win. That's what that word means. And El means God. So you can take this one of two ways. This is either the guy who strives and prevails over God or the one who has a God who prevails and strives on our behalf. In fact, in some ways, it means a little of both, in a sense, a little of both. But let me ask you this. The writer here, Moses says that because you've striven with God and with men and have prevailed. How did he strive with man and prevail? We could go back to the whole history of this guy, jerk Jacob. I mean, remember how he strives with people and he's conniving and he uses all the strength and all the skills that he's got and comes out on top every time and he manipulates and all that kind of stuff. That guy who strives with men and he wins until he meets someone like Laban and then Laban outfoxes him. But in this wrestling match, how does he prevail with God? He holds on to him. I will not let you go until you bless me. So it's not a matter of overpowering God like a wrestling match. It's a matter of saying, I will never let go of you. Never until you bless me. That's how he prevailed over God. God says, you won my heart. You prevailed over me in this wrestling match because you changed from fighting into a person who says, I want you and you alone, and I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. See the big change here? So I'm not going to call you a deceiver and a supplanter, and people aren't going to know you as that anymore. You're going to be known as the one who kind of strove with God, but in a real sense, the one whose God strives for him. And from this point on, in the nation of Israel, they'll be known as a nation whose God always strives on their behalf. We'll keep moving. Then Jacob asked him and said, please tell me your name. Now, why would he ask who seems to be God? Why would he ask his name? Why does he want to know his name? Remember, name means the essential character of the person. We don't really know, but it would be nice to know whether or not we're dealing with an angel or with God himself. Right? That'd be kind of nice. So this guy answers. But he said, why is it that you ask my name? Darn. Which idiomatically is a way of saying, you don't know who I am?
Hello.
Exactly. That's exactly what that phrase means. You know who I am. Come on. You know who I am. It's actually a way to hearken back to say, well, you were praying to me just a couple hours ago. That's me. That's me. You know, that's me. That's what he's saying. This is idiomatically a way of saying, I don't need to tell you because you know who I am. You know who I am. By the way, too, there's not a name for God that's big enough to capture who he is. There isn't. I mean, we could give anyone in this room a name based on our observations about who you are and what you do, and give you a name that pretty much captures who you are in terms of how we see it. But how do you capture someone like God who is so big? How do we get a name that's big enough to say, this is the God we're talking about right here? So he says, I am. I am what? Everything. I mean, that's the implication. That you can't capture God. You can't say, well, Mr. Love God, because he loves us, or Mr. Justice God because he's just. He's all those things and so much more in such a huge plane. All God can say is, I am. The only uncaused thing in the universe. And he blesses him there. I think in large measure the blessing has already just happened. He renamed him. It's as though God has looked inside him and says, you know what, Jacob, something has snapped in these 20 years, and in this threat from Esau now, you're going to face him face to face. And in our encounter here tonight, something has snapped in your head that no longer are you going to be wrestling with your circumstances and with the people. You're going to be embracing me. Something clicked. You yielded. I find it interesting in some of the interviews that Scott did with the Adams Road people. It was the mom. I forgot her name. Lynn, thank you. Sorry, Lynn. Lynn says many times, and I love this phrase, she says that I yielded to God. I yielded. That was the born-again moment. I yielded. Jacob yielded. That's actually a term you use in wrestling. Yielded. Surrendering, but embracing the God who will fight and strive for you. It's a different thing. It's a different thing. You either wrestle on your own strength or you embrace the God who fights on your behalf. You got one of two choices. And in the course of life, that's really true. When something comes into the radar view of your life and it's conflict and it's hard, you have one of two choices. You can say, I'll take all the resources of what I am and how smart I am and how clever I am, and I'll do everything I can, and I'll wrestle with this and I'll make it submit. Arr! And you're wrestling all night, aren't you? You're wrestling all night with these things. Oh! And you're wrestling with it. Or you can stop and say, God, I give this to you. This is bigger than me. And you're the God like Israel. You're the one who strives on our behalf. God, will you strive for me with this? I'm letting go of my wrestling match with the thing, and instead, I'm using all my perseverance to persevere and say, I'm not going to let you go until you fix this. See, that's a very different approach to life. And that's what Jacob has found out right here. Israel. That's what it means. He blessed him. So Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been preserved. The penny part of Peniel means face. El means God. So I've seen God face to face. So he's convinced this is not an angel. He's been with God all night long. All night long. That would have to change it, yeah. Well, we still have Esau to deal with. The sun rose upon him just as he crossed over Penuel, and he was limping on his thigh. Limping. Why? It hurt. He's still walking, but he's not walking well. He crosses over the river, right, from the safe side to the unsafe side where Esau awaits him. How's this going to turn out? And the writer gives us a little piece of interesting trivia. Therefore, to this day, the sons of Israel don't eat the sinew of the hip, which is on the socket of the thigh, because he touched the socket of Jacob's thigh in the sinew of the hip. It's kind of a holy place now to Jews. This is. Because that's the place that God changed Jacob around. Well, so here we are, chapter 33. Jacob lifted his eyes. He looked, and behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him. And that's where the music goes, dun, dun, dun. He's had this incredible experience overnight. Now he's limping, by the way. That doesn't help matters too much. But something clicked up here, in here. Something changed in Jacob. He is no longer this guy who's the conniving, clever, usurper, supplanter, deceiver. Now he's the guy who says, God, I'm not letting you go until you bless me. And he looks out and he sees the same threat from yesterday, but he sees it differently. Because after all, my name is Israel, which means God strives for me. That changes the whole conflict right here. Israel. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two maids, still doing his shepherding thing. And he put the maids and their children in front, and Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. Remember, Rachel and Joseph are the ones that he really loves. The rest have kind of decreasing importance in his mind. So what's he going to do? Is he going to launch out toward Esau and the 400 armed men by sticking his family out there? What a coward! He's limping. Is he really? I mean, I read this. I told you this before. I read these passages with my hand over the next verse, and I stop and go, you got to be kidding me. I put my hand over, you got to be kidding me. He's actually going to march his family out in front of Esau and put them in danger with the 400 men? What a coward. What is he working on, some kind of angle that Esau will feel sorry because I have little kids and I have all these weak little family and my wives, and he won't attack me? What a coward. And that's what I was thinking when I'm reading this. And then I move my hand. Look at this. But he himself passed on ahead of them, all by himself. And he bowed down to the ground 7 times until he came near his brother. He went on ahead of him. We have writings of the pharaohs when vassals of the pharaoh would come and meet with Pharaoh. You know what they would do in order to reinforce the fact that Pharaoh's king, I'm only a vassal king in the area that I'm in charge. I'm like a governor. You know what they would do when they'd approach Pharaoh? They'd go down on their face at a distance, come up, walk a little closer to Pharaoh, go down on their face. This is where Pharaoh can see him. Come up. I mean, they'd approach the castle, not the castle, the palace that way. Then they'd finally get inside, boom, down on their face. You know how many times they would do that? 7 times. Well known in the ancient world that when you did this, you were telling the person you're approaching, you're in charge. You're the Lord, you're king here. It's not me, it's you. I may have some power as a governor, these people would say with Pharaoh, but you know what? You're the one that's in charge. And I'm doing this by doing my body language. So instead of what I thought was this coward, which I should have known better, he's transformed overnight. He actually steps out in front of his family and all by himself takes the point lead and goes right up to Esau with unmistakable body language that says, you're superior to me. I surrender. Yeah. Yep. And Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck. And he kissed him and they wept. How does this happen? Esau was planning Jacob's death 20 years ago. Esau was off in probably the worst desert portions of southern Israel, thinking the entire time, my brother took from me, and this is all I get now. My brother took from me, he took from me, he took from me. When I see my brother Jacob, I'll kill him. 20 years. How does this happen? Well, you ask Jacob, and Jacob would say, it's another thing that God has done on my behalf. God is the one who prevails on my behalf. My name is no longer supplanter. My name is Israel. God strives for me. And somehow God has won this battle on my behalf. And I came in humility, as opposed to when I left town, I left in superiority. I took my brother's place in the family, which is wrong, deceitful. It's pretty clever, but he's not thinking that now. Now he's submissive to his brother. And this is the reaction he gets. Does this remind you of any other story in the New Testament? This part about he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and fell on his neck? Prodigal son. Holy smokes. There it is. Yeah. In a real sense, this is the scene that we would have hoped would have happened in Jesus' story of the prodigal son. The father comes out and does this and reconciles with the son who did wrong. But there's a third person in that story. Who's the third person in the story of the prodigal son? The older brother, who stands aloof off to the side, making criticisms all the time about why is it you're giving that boy who did so many bad things, he's bad, he's bad, and you're gonna kill the fatted calf, we're gonna have this big meal. Here I've been with you this entire time, you didn't do anything like that for me, and I've done everything you asked. Well, in that story, we would have hoped it would have worked out like this. But in Jesus' story, he was trying to highlight the fact that the older brother is the Pharisees, is the Jews, who think that because they obey God's commandments, somehow they have something deserved coming to them. And when they see God in his grace freely give to someone who really doesn't deserve it, it ticks them off. Oh, we could spend all day talking about that. But anyway, I just want to show you that parallel. You can think about that today. Well, he lifted his eyes. He saw the women and the children. And he said, hey, who are these with you? So he said, this is Jacob. Well, the children whom God has graciously given your servant. God has done this. God's done this. And then the maids came near and their children, and they bowed down. They were in front of the line, remember? Leah, likewise, she's next, came near with her children. They bowed down. So they're all bowing down as Esau as the Lord here. And afterward, Joseph came near with Rachel. That's Rachel's son. And they bowed down. All the family came and bowed down to Esau and said, you're the man here. We respect who you are and the authority of who you are. And he said, well, okay, this is Esau again. What do you mean by all this company which I have met? That's all this stuff right here. Look at all the stuff you've given me. And Jacob says, well, to find favor in the sight of my brother? No, my Lord. You're in charge. You're my older brother. You're my Lord here. But Esau said, listen, I have plenty. My brother, let what you have be your own. And Jacob says, no, please, please. If now I have found favor in your sight, then take my present from my hand. For I see your face as one sees the face of God, and you've received me favorably. Against that judgment thing, I have come to face you and to face up to what I've done. Just like someday we all have to face up to what we've done with God. And I've come to you to face up to what I've done. And look, you received me favorably. Favorably. So please take my gift, which has been brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me and because I have plenty. Notice how many times God's getting mentioned from Jacob's side? God's done this, God's done this, God's done this. We don't have any mention anywhere with Esau ever giving credit to God for what Esau has. But Jacob, over and over, he's a changed man. God's done this, God's done this, God's done this. God's the one who strives on my behalf. God's the one who blesses. Remember, I will not let you go until you bless me. God's the one who does this. Esau, my brother, God's done this, not because of my conniving. So, thus he urged him, and he took it. So Esau took the present. By the way, too, in ancient times, this was a tangible documentation of the fact that the reconciliation is real and it's permanent. I mean, it's a way for Esau to say, I forgive you. You know how you say, I forgive you, and say, let's put it on the books? That's true. You receive the gift and you take it. You keep it. That's a way of saying we're done. The book is closed on our confrontations. And by the way, we know that this isn't just Jacob bribing his brother or in some kind of way, because if it were some kind of contractual bribing thing, then Esau would, by ancient standards, be compelled to give a gift back. You always give gifts two ways. But Esau accepted the gift knowing that prior he had lost something, and now his brother is asking forgiveness by giving back. So this is a way to say, we're done. I'll take your gift. Thanks. You're good. So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. Jacob journeyed to Sukkot, built for himself a house, made some booths for his lifestyle. That's what Sukkot means, actually, is booths, temporary dwellings. Therefore are the places named Sukkot. And Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram, that's where Laban lives, and camped before the city. He bought a piece of land there, and he pitched his tent. And this is where we come to the end of the story. They part ways. Let me just show you geographically what goes on, then we'll do some conclusions. You're hovering over the Dead Sea. There's the Sea of Galilee in the north, the Jordan River, Dead Sea below us right there. We're looking straight north. Let's see what else we have here. Here's some cities to help orient you. Jerusalem, Jericho, Amman, Jordan. Jordan's to the right of the Jordan River, and Israel's to the left of the Jordan River. That little river up there, that's the Jabbok River. That's where they've been doing all these things. And let me draw on a couple other places. Here's Sukkot, where he finally went right after this, and Shechem, where he's going to, and where the confrontation happened is right up there on that Jabbok River. That place exists today. You can get an airplane and fly there. Okay? So they split right here, and Jacob goes off to Sukkot, then on to Shechem. Esau goes down to the south, to the eastern side of the Dead Sea and further south. And from that point on, they're separated in the entire story of Genesis until one great event happens. Their common father dies. Isaac dies. And they come together just as you'd expect as reconciled brothers, and they bury their father together. From that point on, Jacob grows with his 12 sons. We still have one son still to be born. The youngest son, Benjamin, is not born yet. He'll be born over on this side. Those 12 boys will raise families that will become the 12 tribes of Israel. And from that point on in the story of the nation of Israel, the nation of Israel will be a large reflection of who Jacob is, This one who started out as conniving and manipulating and supplanting and all this kind of stuff and using his own power, to someone who says, we're completely outnumbered. There's no way we can get out of the situation. We are unworthy in every respect for God's loving kindness, but God, we come to you and we say, will you fight this fight for us? Because after all, our name is Israel, which means that you strive on our behalf. And from that point on, that's the theme of the nation of Israel from here to the end of the Old Testament. And when you get to the New Testament and Jesus the Messiah comes, he's the one that strives on our behalf for salvation. He's actually the outgrowth of the charter what the nation of Israel is. So from this point on, the nation of Israel, the people who are the descendants of Jacob, exist to glorify who God is, because why would God intercede on behalf of this silly little nation who's totally unworthy? That's right. That's the point. God wants to intercede on our behalf. When we're tired of wrestling things in the middle of the night, he wants to intercede. He wants to strive on our behalf. From that point on, every conflict that Israel has will scare the people that they're having conflicts with when they ask, what's the name of this nation, this little nation we're battling with? You know what the name of our nation is? What? God strives on our behalf and he prevails. Oh yeah, well, let's see about that. And they go down figuring out that's true. God glorifies himself through this nation. And it starts with Jacob and his 12 sons. Okay, let's do a wrap up right here. Let me ask you this, and we already touched on this. Do you find yourself wrestling with circumstances? I think we can all look at this. I mean, you all look at this and go, I know exactly what this is all about. I mean, in the middle of the night when you're scared to death about what's going to come tomorrow, I mean, you have a very clear view about what could go down because of where you're at. And you wrestle all through the night, and you wrestle with that, and you wrestle with people that are impacted, and you use every resource you have at your disposal to change the future and make sure it comes out on your behalf for the good. And somewhere along the line, you go, this is just not working. And then you say, wait a second. I can either do that, or I can say, God, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. You promised you'd strive on my behalf. Will you do it here? Will you do it here? I'm dying. Maybe you're actually wrestling with God and his plans for you. That's different. Because that's what Jacob found out. All this time, remember when Jacob before he was born, his parents knew because of an angel that told his mom that the older would serve the younger. Somehow it was already put together that Jacob was going to be the guy in the family. But no, Jacob had to, feel my arm, it's really furry. Of course I sound like Esau. He had to go through all that stuff to wrestle the situation, to try and make it go his way. He never really needed to. Throughout the entire process, he was wrestling with God, and he never needed to. Never needed to. Many times the circumstances in your life, they change in such a way that you start wrestling with them, and you think, where is God? If God really loved me, I wouldn't be going through what I'm going through right now. This is just wrong. Where is God? So you wrestle with the circumstance that God precisely constructed to put in your life for change from his perspective, and you fight him on it. Until in this equal match battle, you finally give up and say, I can't deal with this. And God says, right. This is a good chance for you to go, I won't let you go until you bless me here. I can strive with the circumstance, or I can use the same power to prevail upon God to say, I'm with you, you better save me. That's really the fundamental choices in life. That's the fundamental choices in life. You can either trust or you can wrestle. And when you can't wrestle, you're going to be worrying. So you can worry or you can pray. I mean, that's the way it goes. Sometimes we're wrestling with God and his plans for us. Interestingly enough, God is restrained to bring us to exhaustion. When he does bring those circumstances to your case, just like he did with Jacob, he could have wiped Jacob out on the very first 2 seconds of the match. Ding, ding. Oh, match over. But he puts Jacob in a circumstance where he matches himself with this kind of restraint. I am the God of the universe, but I need to let this boy wrestle for a while. I need for us to kind of, I'll put an end to it sooner or later. Until you finally get it, I need to give this up. This is a bad strategy. I'll give it up and say, okay, God, it's yours. Will you, Israel, for me? Will you strive on my behalf? Will you take this problem and do it? And God just makes it so that everything that you encounter in life is very carefully measured that way. There's no temptation that's common to man that God doesn't somehow give you a way of escape. This is what Paul tells us in one of his letters. That's God saying, I'm going to put you in a circumstance that will not overwhelm you, but man, you'll be tempted to wrestle your brains out. Well, you need to come to me first and say, will you Israel on my behalf? That's what God's trying to tell us. That's the restraint from God. The alternative to wrestling with the circumstance, embrace God. Don't let him go. Don't let him go. And I've heard a lot of you in some really tough circumstances say, I don't know why I'm going through this, but I know two things. For one, I know that this is something that's not accidental from God's perspective. It didn't slip under the radar while God was sleeping last week, and this thing came in my life, and now I'm dying. No, God knows this is going on, number one. And number two, I'm going to trust him to pull me through it and figure out a solution. Because he loves me, and he's got all the power of the universe engaged on my behalf because he wants to bless me. He wants to bless me. So I'm doing this. Right. You have to submit first. And you have to give up your desire to want to be the wrestling hero you think you are. You got to yield and then embrace God. That's the way it works. Finally, this limp. Every limp is a reminder not to do wrestling in the future. No kidding. I mean, no kidding. So the next time you get in one of those situations like Jacob would, and he'd say, well, we're going to go out there and fight him on our own power. And he goes, oh, this isn't going to work. He goes, oh, that's right. It's not going to work. Let's embrace God instead. God gives many of us limps as ways of reminding us that life comes from embracing him and not letting go of him until he blesses us. That's why he leaves those limps with us. They're little reminders from us. It's a very famous limp in the New Testament that we know from the Apostle Paul. He said this. Paul said, in order to keep me from exalting myself, in order to keep me from getting a big head, why? Because I'm so capable at what I do. In order to keep me from exalting myself, God gave me a thorn in the flesh. We don't know what that thorn in the flesh is. But look what Paul tells us it accomplishes. And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I will rather boast about my weaknesses. Why? So that the power of Christ may dwell in me. And that's why Paul had a limp. So he'd be reminded that it's not my power and strength as the best taught Pharisee of the entire New Testament, but it's because in my weakness, God strives on my behalf. And God says, that's so you remember that my grace is sufficient. What I give to you in the circumstance is enough for the circumstance. You can stop wrestling like Jacob stopped wrestling. My grace is sufficient. And I think that's the message Jacob got when he was wrestling after his hip gets touched. God's saying, I got this. You worried about Esau? I got this. My grace is sufficient. Grace in the entire Bible is God's gift of wanting to bless you when you are very unworthy of that blessing. Very unworthy. And in the giving of that gift, he frees us from having to wrestle with the circumstances of life so that we can totally embrace him with our strength instead, because his grace always wins. His grace always wins. His desire to bless us always wins. So embrace him with all your heart. Okay, let's pray. Father, we thank you for this extraordinary passage. Extraordinary passage. And Lord, forgive us when we complain about our limps that you've left us with. Remind us that it's not our power that accomplishes life, but it's your power engaged in our behalf to bless us. That's where life comes from. Lord, remind us that we can take all that we are and all that we have and use it to embrace you with all our strength, with all that who we are, to bless you. So God, we pray that you would continue to remind us throughout our lives from this point on as we leave Jacob behind today, that you'd continue to remind us that there is a promise that's been made to us for life. It started at Abraham, through Isaac, through Jacob, through Judah, on through to the Messiah Jesus. Life abundant. I came that they might have life and have it abundantly. And to accomplish that, you strove on our behalf on the cross to be the conqueror of powers and dominions that are set their face to steal, kill, and destroy in our lives. And you have striven on our behalf that we might have life. God, the simplicity of it still amazes our hearts. Thank you for your great love shown toward us. And Lord, touch our hips and our thighs as we continue to wrestle with the things that we wrestle with today. So thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.